The story of the Shoemaker and the Elves. Once upon a time, in a little town not so different from yours, dear friends, there lived a shoemaker with a heart of gold and fingers skilled in crafting the finest shoes you could ever imagine. In those days, life wasn't always easy. Oh my! The poor shoemaker had fallen on hard times, through no fault of his own. His coins had dwindled, until one evening he found himself with only enough leather for a single pair of shoes. With a heavy sigh, he carefully cut out the leather pieces, arranging them neatly on his workbench. "I'll finish these tomorrow," he told himself, his voice tired but hopeful. The candle flickered as he made his way to bed, where he said his prayers and fell into a peaceful sleep. You see, even when times were tough, the shoemaker had a clear conscience and trusted that tomorrow would bring better days. And guess what? It did. When the morning sun peeked through the window and the shoemaker padded over to his workbench ready to begin his work, goodness gracious, there sat a perfectly made pair of shoes. Not just any shoes, mind you, but the most beautiful shoes he had ever seen. "How can this be?" he gasped, picking them up with trembling hands. Every stitch was perfect, every curve just right. The leather gleamed as if polished by magic itself. Can you imagine how surprised he must have been? Before he could make sense of this wonder, the little bell above his shop door jingled and in walked a customer. The man's eyes widened when he spotted the magnificent shoes. "Those shoes," the customer exclaimed. "I simply must have them. They're extraordinary." The customer was so impressed that he paid more than the usual price. Clink, clink, went the coins as they dropped into the shoemaker's palm. Enough to buy leather for 2 pairs of shoes. That evening, with a spring in his step, the shoemaker cut out the leather for 2 pairs of shoes. "What a good day it's been," he hummed to himself as he arranged the pieces on his workbench. Then off to bed he went, wondering what tomorrow would bring. Well, my curious friends, I bet you can guess what happened. When morning came, the shoemaker rushed to his workbench and, wow, there stood 2 pairs of perfectly finished shoes, even more beautiful than the first pair. Customers flocked to buy these wonderful shoes, and soon the shoemaker had enough money to buy leather for 4 pairs. And just like before, when he woke up the next day, all 4 pairs were finished, sitting there pretty as a picture on his workbench. Day after day, this magical help continued. Whatever the shoemaker cut out in the evening was finished by morning. Ka-ching, ka-ching! His money box grew heavier and his smile grew wider. From a poor man with barely a penny to his name, he became respected, and eventually quite wealthy. But something was tickling his curiosity. Who or what was helping him? The mystery gnawed at him like a puppy with a new bone. One cold winter evening, just before Christmas, when the snow was falling softly outside the window, making the world look like a sugar-coated cake, the shoemaker turned to his wife. "My dear," he said, leaning in close, "can you lean in close too to hear what he's about to say? I think it's time we discover who has been helping us all this time. Why don't we stay up tonight and see with our own eyes?" His wife's eyes twinkled with excitement. "Oh, what a splendid idea," she replied, clapping her hands together. "I'll light a candle, and we can hide behind those clothes hanging in the corner." And that's exactly what they did. The shoemaker cut out several pairs of shoes as usual, then he and his wife tucked themselves away in their hiding spot. The clock ticked loudly in the quiet room. Tick-tock, tick-tock, as they waited, hardly daring to breathe. When the clock struck midnight, bong, 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 something amazing happened. The door to the workshop didn't open, but suddenly there appeared 2 tiny naked men. They were no taller than your hand, with bright eyes and nimble fingers. These little men, or elves as you might know them, hopped onto the shoemaker's bench and immediately began to work. Their tiny hands moved so fast they were almost a blur. Tap, tap went their fingers, stitch, stitch went the thread, as they worked with incredible speed and skill. The shoemaker and his wife watched, mouths hanging open in astonishment. Never had they seen such quick and perfect work. These little fellows were laughing and humming as they stitched and glued and polished. Before the clock struck 1, they had finished all the shoes. Placing them neatly on the workbench, they scampered away as quickly as they had appeared. The next morning, as sunlight streamed through the frost-covered window, turning the workshop into a golden haven, the shoemaker's wife reached for his hand. "Those dear little men," she said softly, her eyes filled with gratitude. "They have made us wealthy with their kindness. But did you see? They were shivering in the cold with nothing to wear." "You're right," the shoemaker nodded, stroking his chin thoughtfully. "They've helped us so much. We must thank them somehow." "I know just the thing," his wife exclaimed. "I'll sew them tiny clothes, shirts and jackets, undershirts and trousers, and knit them warm stockings too. And I," declared the shoemaker proudly, "will make them the finest little shoes that ever adorned an elf's foot." For the next few days they worked with as much joy and care as the elves had shown them. The shoemaker crafted 2 pairs of miniature shoes, each stitch made with love and thanks. His wife's needle flashed as she sewed tiny garments and knitted stockings as soft as a kitten's fur. When everything was ready, they laid out these gifts on the workbench instead of leather pieces. Then, trembling with excitement, they hid themselves once more to watch what would happen. At midnight, right on time, the 2 elves came skipping in, ready to work their magic again. But when they spotted the little clothes instead of leather pieces, they stopped short, their tiny mouths forming perfect O's of surprise. "What's this?" one elf squeaked, poking at a tiny shirt. "Clothes," the other gasped, picking up a miniature jacket with delicate fingers. Then their surprise turned to pure delight. With squeals of joy that would make your heart melt, they quickly put on their new clothes. Oh, the sight of them strutting and preening, admiring themselves and each other. It was simply too adorable for words. Dressed in their finery, the elves began to dance around the workshop, their happiness bubbling over like a pot of soup left too long on the stove. They leaped over chairs and spun around table legs, singing at the top of their little lungs. Are we not boys, neat and fine? No longer cobblers shall we be. And then, with one final twirl and a bow to each other, they danced right out of the door and into the night, never to return. Now, you might think the shoemaker would be sad to lose his magical helpers, but his heart was full. The elves had given him the greatest gift of all, the chance to stand on his own 2 feet again. And from that day forward, everything the shoemaker touched seemed blessed with good fortune. His business flourished, his family thrived, and his shoes became famous throughout the land. And so, my dear little and big friends, as the stars twinkle outside your window tonight, remember the magic that happens when kindness is given and returned. For in the quiet moments, when the world is asleep, who knows what wonders might be unfolding, just like they did in the workshop of the thankful shoemaker and his elves. Sweet dreams, and may your shoes always fit just right. Thank you for listening, and I hoped you liked this story. If you enjoyed it, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to my channel. I have plenty more fairy tales for you.